I'll put on my lights.
You can just see line flick.
Ajahn, are you here now?
สวัสดีค่ะทุกคนค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะอาจารย์ค่ะ
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์ครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับทุกคนครับ
Please Queen Sarah
Yes.
carry on.
Yes, I think that I mentioned to Azita, I think maybe it's good to start with the sutta as you mentioned. Azita, do you have one of those suttas that you said you had been reading that you would like to share?
You have read that already, I think. That one you read is very, very beautiful, and we can talk the details about more understanding.
About the
words.
Ummagga Sutta?
It depends on you. Please select anyone you like to discuss.
Okay.
Sarah, you printed that one, I think, or you put that one on DSG, didn't you? The Ummagga
I did.
Sutta?
I shared it on DSG, yes.
It is a beautiful one. I don't have it in front of me now, I'm afraid, but is that a good one to talk about?
Right. We talked about it last week, but we can talk more about it. One or two people asked a question, Ajahn, about the meaning of the word ummagga, because the English translations are quite strange for it. They use words like approach or acumen. How do you understand the word ummagga? I know it's referring to panya, but is it the ascent of panya or the development of panya? How do you understand the word ummagga?
Because I asked Kun Kampan about the meaning of ummagga, and in Pali, the translation in Thai is just like pop up. See, just arise by conditions. Anattanis is there. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand the truth of the moment of arising and falling away, which is so true. So what is now appearing, it has to arise by conditions and falls away instantly. So what is meant by instantly, Buddha taught by way of processes of different moments, from moment of Avanga, Jalana, and Upacheta, and then it depends on the vara, Panjatavara Vachana, how short it is to experience the object which arises, and actually it falls away so very rapidly too, but the citta falls away more rapid than that. That's why Buddha taught us about each different moment of citta, which experiences an object through different doorways. And on one doorway, the viti citta experience the object, which is the impinge on the eye base. But to show how long Rupa is, he started from Pavanka, and then Pavanka, Atita Pavanka, and Pavanka Charana. So that Rupa falls after 17 moments of Chitta. That's all. So no matter what moment Chitta arises, it lasts for 17 moments. But when it's fully experienced, starting from the Viti Chitta, not the Pavanka, but the Viti Chitta is Panchadvara Vachana, just one moment of just know that what is there, but it does not see. And after that, it conditions the moment of seeing, and seeing is the actual moment of experiencing the object, and then fall away, not knowing at all what it is. And imagine the whole rupa like table or chair or whatever, cannot impinge on it. But the reality, the rupa, upataya rupa, or that which can be seen, is there with each kalapa. And we don't know how many kalapa impinge on, but the citta experience that impinge on it. The nimitta is so very, very fast. That's why we have to consider the difference between each citta in a process and in a one process, like Panchadvara, like seeing process and Bhavanka, and then Minda process. The object appear when it does not fall away yet, and after it has fallen away through Minda, and so on, just to understand that all are dhammas, and they are so true that Buddha has enlightened the truth, and he told us to develop right understanding from hearing, considering, until it's there. So the moment when citta arises and falls away is not the object of understanding at the level of intellectual understanding, and from having more confidence of anatthaness, no expectation, each reality begin to be understood as so anatta, even right now. No selection to have such and such sound or sight or whatever is there to appear by processes of citta. And so when we use the word with right understanding, it means that there must be the understanding from the very beginning of the anatthaness of whatever is there now, and begin to understand that what is not appear is the arising and falling away of reality, while it can be object of direct understanding, because Buddha taught the way, the path, so very subtle. Who knows that each moment of understanding developed on and on, it will lead to experiencing directly the arising papa to be no one and nothing, no one at all, nothing at all, only that. And imagine how little each reality, because when whatever appears, there's so many, many kalapas as rupa, and many moments of experiencing. The sampatichana santirana doesn't appear at all, only seeing. And then sometimes when the citta is strong, like lopa, it can be object of understanding. And one may say, it's lopa, see, when it's there. But it's not the exact moment of that which has fallen away. So the meaning of pop up is must be panya at level of vipassana jnana, because unexpectedly at all just pop up to appear as the object of understanding, to confirm more confidence of that which has been experienced at that very moment only, not the other moment. Otherwise, how can there be the word such umangka?
Tana Jankup, may I say a few words here?
Yes, please.
I'm kind of intrigued this has been brought up, but I believe you are exactly right. It says in the commentaries that ummagga is an exact synonym for panya.
Yes,
And
because at that moment, if there is not panya enough, it does not appear as that which arises, means pop up by conditions.
exactly right. And I noticed that Kunsera and Kunina were having a conversation about this point. And sometimes I notice translators, as translators must do, they do their best, they use a certain word to translate, in this case, ummagga, and Bhikkhu Bodhi used the word acumen. Now, that can be very confusing, but in English, the word acumen can allude to the quality of sharpness, of wit, or wisdom at that level, at that conventional level. And even in the Jatakas, I understand the word ummagga, like there's a word used in Pali, ummagachora, which means a wise thief. Now that word, of course, in the sense of the Dhamma, it's not a kind of wisdom, but there the word would be translated like something like a sneaky thief or a foolish fellow or something like that. So translators will always have this problem of using certain words. And that's why it's always good to go to the Pali and look at the Pali word. If that's still confusing, sometimes we can look at the commentaries and they will make it a lot clearer for us. And that word, that commentarial phrase, which is not, I can't remember it now, makes it very clear that the word ummagga refers to panya.
Yes, the commentary note I have here, which was included with the translation, says that it identifies both ummagga and patipana with panya, and the ummagga is the rising up, which is like the pop-up, the movement of wisdom, or wisdom is called ummagga in the sense of rising up. It's also called discernment in the sense of discerning. Ummagga ti umu janam panyagam gamanam ti ato. So, and so on. So it mentions that it is the rising up of panya. So I think this is exactly where the phrase pop up is. Anyway, that's very interesting, Ajahn, because I didn't realize when we introduced the sutta that this word ummagga is what you've been referring to as pop up. And as you say, it has to be highly developed panya, not just any panya arising now.
And Ajahn, I noticed the word ummagga. The word ummagga, we have the word actually relating to word path. So there is a kind of a connection there with the path, which would be the correct path, which we could say by kind of connection, sammaditthi, or walking the path correctly. But it's also referring to the cleverness of chitta at that moment. Ummagga, as I understand it in this sense also, because the Buddha, Samma Sambuddho, was referring to this bhikkhu as having ummagga, which is a cleverness and a sharpness and a kind of an incisive perspective on the Dhamma when he asked the questions that he was asking of the Buddha.
Can there be many meanings of just one word? Like
certainly, Ajahn. Yes, certainly there can be many meanings.
That's one meaning. So are we now talking about panya? Right? Panya
Yes.
has many degrees. Panya at level of pariyatti cannot be ummagga at all. Panya at level of patipatti cannot be ummagga at all. But panya at level of pativeta is that different from the intellectual panya and the patipatti panya, because it's time for panya which has developed to be the moment of arising by conditions. No expectation, no one can say at this or that time or now or then at all, because it's so anatta. Otherwise, how can there be more confidence on the truth of all dhammas are anatta if that has not been directly experienced so clearly? And that is the panya which is so clear and so keen, like we have talked about. So it's all the matter of panya to understand that at the degree of intellectual understanding, even one knows that now seeing arises and falls away, but it doesn't pop up when there's nothing, and then it pop up to appear to panya only. Because from the beginning of whatever, it's the beginning of understanding the teaching, the intellect understanding. Can panya experience just one object which arises and it means pop up? See, only one. What does it mean? There's no door, no table, no people, no sound, and not anything at all. Only that which pop up as we have studied, like not me, it's that characteristic. And so that which is the object and panya pop up to understand that very moment so clear and so keen. Otherwise, what is the characteristic of Prativeda? So I think that when we read Tipitaka, the point is to understand what Buddha meant for different levels of panya. And realities are covered up from eons and eons ago. It does not pop up to any level of ignorance at all. But when it's panya develop on and on, that which covers the truth, let go, that little by little. That's why we understand what is meant by how the path is the Eightfold Path, because it's so very subtle. No one knows that now how much understanding of what is now appearing. Just understand the word that it's nama, see, and nama means that which experiences. But the panya, which begins to understand the characteristic which experience, is not strong enough. That's why Buddha, after his enlightenment, he said that all dhammas are so subtle, very profound, very hard to experience. But since anyone who has developed enough can understand it, so he taught about what is now appearing at different level, intellectual understanding, or it will lead to patipatti, and patipatti will lead to the pop-up. But see, Panya has to develop stronger and stronger from the first vipassana jhana, which begins to understand the characteristic of that which appears, but not long, so short. That's why that understanding of level of that degree applies what is there in life by conditions, hearing more, considering more. So it conditions time to begin to understand what is has experienced at level of that level of vipassana jhana to daily life, to have more understanding for higher understanding. So pop-up depends on degrees of panya and of vipassana jhana too. Otherwise, what is meant by the explanation about it and not understanding it, where it is it now or not? How deep it is? What is so subtle is this very moment. No one knows all that they're not self at all. It's something all the time. Even right now, what is seen is something. Does not pop up when there's nothing. And then that is so clear that nothing else beside that which is object of right understanding to understand it. Otherwise, even it appears like hardness, there can be doubt. How many kalapas is touched? Not just one as it appears, and one is the nimitta too. So this is the subtlety, the profoundness of each reality. Otherwise, one might think that, oh, this is easier than the other. That is the idea of self. Something there is easier than the other something. So one begins to understand what is meant by parami. It has to be with panya or by panya only. And what are the words of the Buddha in Tipitaka, no matter what part, Vinaya, Suttanta, or Abhidhamma, are about whatever is now appearing, depending on how much understanding is there of the reality, not just of the word, trying to get the meaning of it, but the meaning is now, this moment, no matter what word is used, like different level of panya, see? So one begins to understand the difference how far from this one to another one to another one to another one. It takes time, that Satya Barami, to understand that it's not yet the moment when that pop up. And only Panya experiences that by conditions. Suttamaya Panya, Chintamaya Panya, and Pavana from moment to moment. Panya develops. To let go. So the point is to let go. Not to understand the word or this or that. That is not letting go. Letting go is understand the meaning of the word, like Umanka. It has to be Panya. But what level of Panya? See?
I think we're very fortunate, Tanajanka, to have you help us understand the Dhamma, because I notice with many translators, they use certain words, and I'm imagining that mostly they don't have they haven't had the good fortune of being able to listen to people like you to help us understand the subtleness and the depth of Dhamma, and also mostly to apply it to the present moment. Most translators, in my opinion, they don't seem to be able to do this because, well, they haven't met the right person in this lifetime anyway. So they do their best and use certain words like acumen. And I have thought about that word acumen, and I think I mentioned it in the email that I sent, or the note that I sent to Sarah, was that it can relate to the word accuracy, which also, in a sense, relates to Panya. So if we haven't got accurate understanding of the Dhamma, we will not understand it correctly.
Because you see that each word of the Buddha is so very precious, because it begins to be clear little by little. And this is the way to pay respect, do good to the Buddha. See, to keep his word and the meaning of the word clear and correct. Otherwise, there can be wrong understanding by word or by not carefully study, not study again, consider again and again and again and again, until more and more understanding of the truth of this moment. The most important thing to check is what about understanding of what is there now. All understanding at any level comes from the words of the Buddha, who point out what is there, a reality, not self. Each word like Umanka, see, we know that it's Panya, but Panya at that level. And if he didn't use the word Umanka, how can we imagine? How can it can be direct experience? Doubt is little by little eliminated at moment of understanding at different stages of Panya, intellectual or the Patipatti or the Pativeda. Yes, please.
And I think, Tanajan, I think the Buddha, and I don't know why, because I can never, I'm imagining that the Buddha used this word to talk about the incredible subtlety of the Dhamma, that which is hidden, which often you remind us of, and that is so difficult to understand.
Otherwise, we cannot understand how much subtlety it is. They just talk about the profoundness, the subtlety of the Dhamma, but when and where and what, it's now.
It has to be this moment. It has to be the understanding of what appears now, because otherwise we just get lost in the detail of the term and the word and the meaning and forget about what is appearing right now, the lobha now, the seeing now, the hearing now. Because without the understanding of the reality now, whatever word or term we use, the understanding can never develop. So whatever the Buddha spoke, it's always about the understanding at this moment. So I think it's helpful to always come back to now and what appears now.
Is there Umanga now? Not yet, because it has to be not I, only Panya, which understand more and more about realities in daily life. Because before it can let go the clinging to the five khandhas, so that the pop-up can be experienced by Panya.
Tanajan Cup, I think you are so wise to always remind us of Ummagga. And I love the way that you reminded us of Ummagga at that moment.
Otherwise, when and where it would be, see, without understanding clear and clearer.
And without the understanding developing from this very moment, the understanding of what appears now, otherwise it could never develop to be Ummagga, to be Pativeda understanding. So it always has to be the beginning right now. No matter what appears, no matter the seeing, the hearing, the agitation, the lobha, it's the reality now, which is anatta, to be known clearer and clearer.
I believe, Sarah, that Tanajan referred to, yes, you've just referred to Pativeda, but the Ajahn also referred to the different levels of Ummagga, be it at the level of Pariyatti, Patipatti, or Pativeda.
I think she just said that Ummagga Panya refers to Vipassana Jnana Panya, to Pativeda Panya, but the understanding has to develop now from Pariyatti to Patipatti in order to be Ummagga Panya.
I believe, Sarah, if you were to go back and listen, you would notice that Ajahn talked about the different levels of Ummagga.
That's right. There are different levels of Vipassana Jnana, and Ummagga has to be Vipassana Jnana at level. And so Pativeda is another word for Vipassana Jnana. Penetrate to the truth, which is now just like as it is, as Buddha has enlightened.
It's the levels of Vipassana Jnana, not the levels of Pariyatti, Patipatti, and Pativeda that are being referred to. But without the Pariyatti now, it can never be that Vipassana Jnana, that degree of Ummagga Panya.
I may have misunderstood that, but I distinctly heard Ajahn referring to the different levels of Ummagga or different levels of Panya, which Ummagga can refer to. So I may have misunderstood that, my correction.
And do you have any questions you'd like to bring up today, or anyone else, any of the people in North America?
Tanajan, oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
You go
Sundara. I have nothing particular today.
Okay. Tanajan Cup, what I would like to know, it's just a small point. In the Sudhavasa, do they have 5 senses or 3?
5 what? I cannot hear.
I'm talking about the Pasada Rupa for beings born in the Sudhavasa. Do they have 5 senses or 3?
Depending on planes of existence.
Yes, like if you're an anagami and you are reborn, you'll be reborn, as you must be if you're still anagami, you'll be born in the Sudawasa. Now, my understanding, I'm not absolutely sure on this, is that there is only seeing, hearing, and body sense, no tasting, and no smelling. So, is that correct, Tanajan, or how do you understand the senses in the Sudawasa? Is there 3 senses, or are there 5?
This is the different births of different planes, right? For Deva, no need to have just a small kalapa at all, just sudden, instantly, the whole body there.
Correct.
But in this plane of existence, at the moment of birth, how many kalapa? See?
And so you're asking how many Kamaja Rupa in the Sudawasa plane, Ajahn?
Sudava and it's a plane of Deva, like the heaven plane and Brahma plane. See?
Yeah,
the Opapata birth.
I'm talking about the highest Rupa Brahma Loka.
The same as that is what is meant by Upapati. See?
Cup.
Upapata.
So, Upapati, you say Upapati, Tanajan?
Upapatika birth, there are many kinds.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's what I understand. Upapadika, you're talking about spontaneous rebirth.
All there in a moment of birth, not like human being. Even in
John,
like health, Upapadika as well.
Yes, but say for example, John, in the Kama Vachara Loka, like the human realm and like the Deva Loka, they have 5 senses. But in the Rupa Brahma Loka, I have this understanding that maybe they, especially in the Sudawasa, the highest Brahma Loka, the highest Rupa Brahma Loka, they only have 3 senses. They have 5, do you believe, Ajahn?
Sense, right? No body sense, no time sense.
Sorry, please repeat that, Ajahn.
There can be nose, but no sense.
So you're saying that there will be no smelling or no tasting?
Because
in the Rupa Brahma Loka.
No Kana Pasada, no Jiva Pasada, and no Kaya Pasada.
So even no Kaya Pasada as well?
Right. Because there is the suppression of this Rupa. But for eyes and ears, it's so very useful to hear the Buddha, the Buddha's word, and see and pay respect and so on.
That makes okay, Ajahn. That's interesting. I didn't think that I thought they may not have smelling and tasting, but it's interesting to note that they have no body sense as well.
That's why they are Brahma.
Yes, correct. Yeah, correct, John. Thank you, Tanajan, for clarifying that for me. I appreciate that. Kun Ann, you may I'm sorry, please, thanks for giving way there. No. Please go ahead.
I don't think I'm quite ready to go ahead. I thought of something this afternoon and got distracted. I'm just trying to remind myself here again. So if you can give me a few minutes, is there anyone else? Tadao, are you here?
Can I have a comment?
Yeah.
Sawadee-ka, Tan Ajahn. I want to thank you so much for your kindness in helping us to understand the Buddha's teachings. And also today, this morning, I was thinking about what is it that I really know, because my head was going busy. I had many things in my head to think about, to do. And then I thought, well, what is it? What is it that I really know? And of course, I come back to that, the five senses. They're the things that are real, as I've been taught. And they're the actual only things that seemed real at the moment, because the stuff in my head was everywhere. But the thing I was touching was right there. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the realities that appear that can be known to eventually get to those higher levels. But I think I just need to hear more and more of what is real right this moment.
To understand the truth of what is there, which hasn't been thought about at all. Do you have hate? This is the beginning to understand Dhamma. Do you have hate? Always in my head, but do you have hate?
Well, no. Yes and no. Conventionally, yes, but in reality, definitely not.
Mm-hmm. This is the beginning to understand that actually there's no thing and no one at all. It's the way conditioned reality arise and fall away from years and years ago and on and on and on, non-stop. It has to be like that when there's no understanding of the truth. So now we are talking about the absolute truth, and that can be known at this very moment. For example, do you have hate now?
Well, I'm thinking I have a head.
And what is hate that you think you have?
It's really a concept.
Actually, it's the head.
In reality, no head.
This is to be reminded that actually there's nothing, not only head, no leg, no whatever, arms and so on, only realities. And Buddha enlightened this. Otherwise, he didn't tell us about the truth, the absolute truth. What is there? So that there can be less and less attachment because a little more understanding of the truth. But the kilesa has been accumulated so long, so only just hearing about it, just to learn to understand the truth, is not enough. It has to be directly experienced with right understanding of high degree. For example, you think about head, but not understanding that actually there's no head, no arm at all. There are only citta, cetasika, and rupa. So my head full of thought and so on, that's not true, because the truth is that only a reality which is conditioned to arise, no one can stop the condition for its arising, because now it's there, no one can make it arise. That which sees, that which hears, can it be someone or something? Because it's just the seeing. That which arises and see. If it does not arise, that which seen cannot appear at all. So only when seeing arises, it experiences that which shall appear. At this moment, where's your arm? Where's your head? No, not at all. Nothing at all. Come to nothing to understand that actually there's nothing and no one. What is there is only a conditioned reality arising and then falling away instantly. From whom you heard this word? from the enlightened one. So what is meant by enlightenment? To understand the truth of that which appears so clear, nothing is left to take for wrong understanding or ignorance at all. That's why the enlightened one knows the truth that at the moment of seeing, nothing is there at all. But the arising and falling away of that which experiences is so very rapidly. That's why what appears, seem, and look to be something all the time, all at once, but actually it can be all at once. The Buddha taught about each moment of that which arises and experiences by conditions, moment to moment, and without understanding of the arising and falling away. The wrong understanding is there because it experiences, so that it is I, because no understanding that is it which arises and see. And this is what it's meant by intellectual understanding. So true. Otherwise, how can it lead to more understanding of higher and understanding of whatever which hasn't been known before? But after hearing the teachings, respect the one who taught. Otherwise, there cannot be any understanding of whatever appears now. This is a kind of miracle, the best of all kinds of miracle, because from ignorance, there can be the beginning of understanding the truth, little by little, to have more confidence. So at moment of directly experience the truth, as Buddha taught, much more confidence of what has been heard, that it's not just the word, but it's the reality, the way it is, which is covered up without, and there's no understanding at all. So the word of truth begin to understand and develop to the degree that it can let go the akusala and understand what is there, not self, not me, but the sati. And each word of the Buddha taught about reality right now can be understood at that moment, not just hearing about it, no head, no arm, but in truth, actually, much more than that.
John, could I ask a question, please, for clarification? What comes first, the understanding of what is appearing or the idea of no head, no arm?
What came? We have to come back to this very moment. What is seen? This is the beginning to have chanda, to understand the truth. What is seen? We can simply say that which is seen. But what is seen? Which is seen? Can it be just flowers and doors and bed and anything around? Not at all. Because what is seen is only that which can impinge on the ibis.
Right.
Okay. See? So what is meant by that is more subtle, so deep to know that when it's such that to understand it clear, it has to be nothing besides that which appears. So there has no doubt about what is meant by that which appears. Not at all, not anything at all.
Right. Just one reality is the object of understanding, just one reality at a time.
No.
But at that moment of understanding, the thinking world doesn't have to disappear. There is still thinking in the normal case of people and things, but there at the same time, in parallel, there is understanding that what is experienced by eye consciousness is just visible object.
But not at the moment of seeing, right? This is to be known clear what is meant by one doorway, one object.
Right. But the understanding of what is of visible object occurs in parallel with the thinking of the world in terms of people and things.
So it's not the moment of seeing, it's the moment of thinking about that which has seen.
Realities arise so quickly, so there can be the understanding of the visible object interspersed with the moments of thinking about what is seen.
So it's just like the magic world, see? And who is the magician? Chitta and Chetasika, the arising and falling away, just flow and make the world as so many things in a moment. But actually, Buddha pointed out the moment in a process, a moment in a process of experiencing an object in just a doorway. This is what he has been enlightened. So we understand now what is meant by enlightened. Not just thinking, but it's moment of directly experience. And how come without the development of parami, it's impossible? Because even to have hiri and ottappa, when there's no understanding, it's not there yet for anyone who hasn't heard about the teaching. Even one has heard about the teaching so much about the Cetasikas, but does it arise like at moment of akusala, no hiri and no ottappa, just even not akusala kamma yet, but only the moment of being akusala. Ignorance is a hiri ottappa, to see the danger, to be ashamed not to understand it as it is. So each word comes to this moment to understand that actually there's no I and no one at all, and understand that very subtle reality, like seeing, cannot see at all. What is seen is that which impinges on the eye sense, see, and how little it is. And what about the little eye sense? See, it's there. Conditioned, a moment of seeing, but not just one. So many, as long as whatever is now appearing, it has been touched on the eye sense, the eye base. But no one knows, because it has to be the highly developed panya taught by Buddha. This is the noble truth of the path which let go with or by understanding. When there is no understanding, how can there be the letting go of the idea of my head? Actually, right now, no head at all. Only when it's touched, it's hard. When it's see, it's only that which can impinge on the eye base. And it can be smelled, but the smell is not the head. It is smell. And it's there with the primary rupas, Patavitatu, and so on. See, only that which is conditioned to arise and fall away in split seconds, unknown, if there's no enlightenment of the Buddha. So deep, so we begin to understand what is meant by so subtle, so profound, because it appears but no understanding of the truth of it. Until hearing the truth and consider the path and more confidence of know me, because it will lead to the eradication of the wrong understanding of taking whatever as something. For example, hearing now. See, it hears, but not understanding the truth that it just arises to hear. There must be the latency of I see, I hear, I think. So at the moment of thinking about such and such, what things? Not me.
But it's by the understanding of the reality of hearing and so forth that the idea of my hearing or I hear is let go of. That the reality, it's the understanding developed by when realities are the object of understanding.
So it's quite hard, very hard and difficult to let go the who know or who understand. See, again, and again of whatever is there in life.
But can't we say, Ajahn, that letting go of the idea of I, me, and mine, it happens naturally as the panya is developed?
As naturally as seeing right now, no one. So the letting go is no one, but the understanding, let go.
Right. So it needs patience because that letting go is going to take a long, long time.
And that is the letting go, see, the way of letting go. Parami, Khanti.
Depending, may just be repeating words.
Yes, but you see that it's a very useful because there can be a moment of even thinking about it at any time, swimming, eating, or watching TV, or so very enjoy something, or realities that has to be known before the eradication of the idea of self can be as a sotapanna. And it's not just the word, it appears as it is. This is Pativeda. Otherwise, it's I all the time who understand this word or this chapter or this sutta and whatever is now as not self, but actually, if it doesn't appear as it is, that's how short it is. And through what mind or process, more than just that which just arises and falls away, before it can condition the nimitta as shape and form.
Thank you, John.
ขอบคุณค่ะ
And I think, Azita, everyone understands what you mean by being all over the place and in one's head. And usually this is just the story of I again, isn't it? Thinking of one's confused mind and the general mess of life in samsara. But actually it's just thinking about what's been seen and heard and thinking about different stories and ideas, just like dreaming, just fantasizing about this and that and being in one's head and in a mess and so on. And it's real that there can be understanding even then, even now, of thinking and the confused state and the clinging to oneself, so on.
I know what you mean by getting back to what is real and sensed or objects, but one must not fall into the trap of thinking that if I'm so confused, I need to focus on sensed or objects to get back to reality, because reality is always there to be objective understanding.
Yes, thank you. But
I could be thinking of another object instead of right now, this moment of confusion or thinking about one's head or clinging to self.
yes, they're all good reminders. And I think if we're not reminded about realities arising and falling, we do stay with those thoughts and they increase and become chaos when you look at the state of the world. One of the suttas, the little suttas I found, was about attachment and then clinging and then possessiveness and how it goes on and on. So if there's not the knowing that attachment just arises, then there's the creation of I own this, I have to protect this, it's getting bigger, I'll have to have an army, and it just goes on and on.
The fantasy about I just gets greater and greater and greater. Yes.
And just one. What did you say, John?
I was just going to say, I know there's a tendency to be worried about one's ignorance and confusion and lack of understanding, but that's another distraction, isn't it? Because even at those moments, there are realities appearing that can be the object of understanding. So it's not a matter. it's not a matter of thinking we have to clear the confusion in order for there to be more awareness and understanding, because it can pop up, it can pop in at any moment. But I agree that having the reminders that we do have from these discussions is very useful in helping to keep us on the straight and narrow, as it were, in that regard.
And there was something Ajahn said a moment ago about when you smell, it's not the head. And I thought that reminded me of when I was saying goodbye to my granddaughter, and I leant down and smelled her hair. And I said, your hair smells nice. But, you know, it wasn't. Her hair is not real. The smell is. So that was also a good little reminder.
But hair is not real, but there are realities that are taken for hair.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
It's not a complete figment of the imagination, say, hair and head. There are realities there, and table for that matter.
However, Jonathan, what goes on in my head most of the time is definitely imagination.
Well, that's what thinking does, isn't it? That's the function of thinking.
Often the fantasy about the head and the nice smelling hair of the head and so on. Yeah, not forgetting there's no hair, no head at all, even for an instant now. Yeah. Would you like to read out your sutta now, Sita, the one about attachment?
It's from the in the Buddha's words, from translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and it's just a short one, and it's called, it just says it's the dark chain of causation. So it's the Buddha speaking with Ananda. So thus, Ananda, independence upon feeling, there is craving. Independence upon craving, there is pursuit. Independence upon pursuit, there is gain. Independence upon gain, there is decision-making. Independence upon decision-making, there is desire and lust. Independence upon desire and lust, there is attachment. Independence upon attachment, there is possessiveness. Then niggardliness, which I guess is, I'm not sure how that's translated, niggardliness. Independence upon niggardliness, there is defensiveness. And because of defensiveness, various evil, unwholesome things originate. The taking up of clubs and weapons, conflicts, quarrels and disputes, insults, slander and falsehood. And it's from the Digha Nikaya Mahanidana Sutta.
It's all about causation and the cycle, the dependent origination. And so one can see how, because while the roots of ignorance and attachment are there, it just conditions more and more attachment and different kinds of aversion and all kinds of problems and troubles in the world. And it's
I thought it was a good description of what goes on in the world, not just today, but in the past and most probably into the future.
Yeah, and it's not even now, the clinging now leading to niggardliness and so on, and disturbances and difficulties. So it's daily life too, not just what happens to the rest of the world when they're at war, but daily life. All kinds of, like the issues that one imagines in one's head, is all from the clinging and ignorance from the very beginning.
And watching the children when they get tired in the evening, fighting. One gets angry because the other one's got something. So, yeah.
The possessiveness and then the defensiveness and the anger and all from the clinging to oneself, clinging to what's seen, to what's heard, to what's thought about. Otherwise, no disturbance at all without the clinging.
And Desita, Tanajan talked about before about the magician, or the magic in the sense that the mind always creating ideas, and it's essentially out of nothing. So this idea of the magician who creates the world which we think exists. So this idea of it being somewhat miraculous, but it's of course based on Paramattha Dhammas, but we're always mistaking those Paramattha Dhammas for something. And Tanajan, perhaps what I would really appreciate you to talk more about how you understand the word, what you mean by the word the magician.
Without citta, can there be anything appearing?
Certainly not, Ajahn.
So citta experiences an object at a time, right?
Correct, Ajahn.
So what is seen now is that which experiences that which is seen, right?
Correct, Ajahn.
And that which is seen has to impinge on the eye sense as the condition for seeing to arise, right?
Correct, Ajahn.
So what is there in just a moment of seeing?
Just those experiences, or just the experience of what is seen.
Not a bird, not people, things at all, right? But how come
Correct.
they appear? Because citta arises and falls away in split second. That is the magician.
So Tanajan, so you're talking there about the rapidity of the arising and falling, not what the chitta chitta conjures up, or not what the chitta makes up out of those experiences.
And the see is not a thinking, right?
Correct, Ajahn.
Thinking about that which is seen as something, because not understanding that arising and falling of each moment. So the citta plays the part as magician.
So you're saying the chitta plays the part of magician because it creates this idea of something.
Mm-hmm. Because seeing, hearing, smelling, and thinking go around so very, very fast. That's the way the magician does, right?
True, Ajahn. Yes, true. Yes, thank you, Tanajan.
The word of the Buddha bring about understanding little by little to have more confidence of the truth. Otherwise, there must be condition for thinking about this and that, go astray all the way to other things, not to understand that which are appearing as what Buddha said. But there must be conditions for each moment. When it's happened like that, the developed Panya can understand that as not self, until that which is learned is not self either. Everything becomes no one and no thing, little by little. It cannot be sudden understanding that there is no bird in the picture, see? And no one here at all, because it's my sister or my friend all the time. But actually, it can bring about the moment of thinking of what has been heard, even so short, but it's there by conditions. And when it's more, it conditions more thinking about that until it think more about reality in a day rather than the other things, the other subjects. But without that, Suptamaya Panya and Chintamaya Panya, how can there be moments of understanding that which appears as conditioned moment? It's not I who try to do by this way or that way. Impossible, because it's wrong understanding of the self. When there's no self, but there are ignorance. So the moment of understanding, which let go a little bit of wrong understanding and avijja, can understand better of that object which is now appearing until its moment of direct awareness, direct understanding of that, without thinking about what is that? It is nama, it is rupa, see. But there can be such, depending on conditions, but the developed panya can begin to understand that little by little. So this is the way of developing understanding daily, naturally, because all dhammas are so natural. What is the thinking now? What does it think about? Say, depending on conditions. Even listening to the music, at that moment, there can be condition for right understanding to understand that moment, only just sound. And Panya, which has developed, begin to understand it as it's just that, it's just the sound. And whatever follows, like or dislike, can be known directly, little by little, by Panya of different degrees. So natural, anything, beginning to not doing anything because that is I do. But it is there by conditions, no matter what. It has a reason. It appears to be known as we have heard, little by little. At ease, be at ease, see. It's there already by conditions. Only Panya, whether it's there or not, to begin to understand the truth little by little, so very little at a time. But it can be more and more, little. And this is the meaning of bhavana. No one, Panya, performs its function at the moment of understanding. That's why each word of the Buddha is the word of Panya.
We are indeed very fortunate, Tanajan, to have these reminders from you.
This is the way to respect the Buddha. What had been taught by him, we carry on, because that is the Bodhisattva purpose, destination, to become the one who can share the enlightenment, what he is known to the others. That's why we keep his word, study carefully, and keep it to not to let it just go down or run away or pass on without understanding.
And when he taught about the conjurer's trick, he talked about how the cheetah is far more amazing than the artist who creates a beautiful picture with all its detail, because the cheetah rises and falls away so rapidly, but it's not seen, just the conjurer's trick is not seen. And we take what appears for being something permanent, like the head or the arm or computer, or because of the conjurer's trick, not imagining how extraordinary it is, not having any idea what will appear next at each moment. That's why the Buddha-nussati we talked about the other day can be right now at this moment, not needing to go somewhere or think of something special, but appreciating what has been taught by the Buddha. Go ahead, Anne.
I was going to say I have two questions, but let me ask the one that just came to my mind with you mentioning Buddha-nussati. There's been a discussion online. Excuse me, I just need to get it up. There we go. About Ajahn, it started with something you had mentioned and was transcribed somewhere, but it says, at any moment of understanding, do not forget who brings about this understanding to the whole universe. And I understand that to be the teachings of the Buddha. Had the Buddha not enlightened the truth, and other of the disciples and arahants carried on, we would not know of it today. But then, no, it shouldn't be say but, I'm going to say, and then it says, any moment when the citta is full of gratitude, we understand what was hidden. And I think it's the full of gratitude, and I'm thinking that moment wouldn't necessarily be the understanding, but I guess it would. It's like the revealing. Anya has revealed the truth that we have been studying about. And then it's also it being a moment of gratitude. And I guess that's what I would like to hear more about.
To talk or to say his words, is it gratitude?
No, to understand.
Mm-hmm. At any moment, there is the understanding of his word and sharing that, is that the gratitude? Keep on the word from person to another person. Otherwise, no one can understand his word. So
sorry, I think I missed something there.
Understanding and the way to pay gratitude, to be grateful, is to talk or to use or to speak or to say his word to the others, on and on and on and on.
I see. So that's, yes, I see that. Okay, I think that helps. I think what confused me, and it's my lack of understanding it said the moment when the citta is full of gratitude, we come to understand what was hidden. So it's not necessarily at that moment of understanding that the gratitude arises, but it conditions the gratitude. Is that right?
Yes, can we say when there's the understanding of what has been hidden before, like understanding about how it's just citta now that thinks, not myself, not my head, but just one citta after another. So when there is the understanding of what has been taught, there can be the appreciation of gratitude of who has taught it, the Buddha, and there can be the gratitude of understanding, the benefit of understanding here and now. Otherwise, what people take for being gratitude, like if they go to the temple to pay respect and repeat the taking of refuges, but without any understanding, then who knows whether there's any kusala gratitude or whether it's just attachment to those moments. Or even now, there can be attachment to masquerading gratitude.
Yes.
It all comes back to the understanding.
Yes, and yes, and the gratitude really, if said with the, I'm just trying to consider it, gratitude without, with understanding is clearly without the idea of self. But you really there can't be gratitude with the idea of self.
And when one thinks about people, because in truth, there is no Buddha, there is no Ajahn. So it is actually the appreciation of hearing the truth and understanding and sharing the truth, as was just said. Otherwise, it's like more clinging to this or that person instead of just understanding the value of understanding for the sake of understanding and sharing it.
Yeah, I think I see that.
And
Thank you.
Roti actually asked a good question about why does it matter that it has come from the Buddha, for example, or, well, in a way, it doesn't matter at this moment when there is understanding. It just understands. One doesn't have to think where it's come from. But without the Buddha's teachings, without it having been taught and shared, it would be impossible to understand anything about seeing now or hearing now. But at the moment of understanding, no thought of who or what or where, because it's just understanding.
Yeah. The other moments would be the subsequent moments, the who, what, or where would be moments of thinking,
Right.
which may or may or may not be with right understanding.
Right. May or may not be kusala, yes.
Yes. Good way to put it. Okay, thank you.
How can there be the understanding?
How can there be the understanding?
Yes.
Only by listening, discussing, considering, and there being the accumulation of understanding.
The one who speaks is the one who has enlightened or not?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding. Ajahn, the one who speaks or the one who is enlightened?
Otherwise, how can one know that how come to have such understanding? Just by no condition, so what?
No, there must be conditions,
So how come to be understanding of the truth, the absolute truth of reality right now?
By conditions.
From what are conditions?
From eons ago, from accumulations.
By oneself?
No. Again, by conditions.
So one understands from whom, no matter we call what. But there must be the panya, which experience directly the truth, enlighten the absolute truth.
Yes.
If the Buddha had never become enlightened, then
we wouldn't know.
Otherwise, how can we use any word for that person, for all? Like you use the word, I use that word, but the truth is that what is meant by Buddha, ignorance or panya.
Panya, the truth.
This is the way to understand who is the enlightened one.
By understanding that the truth, the one who enlightened the truth. Who is the enlightened one? By conditions. Again.
And thought, right? Otherwise, no one can hear the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is the only way to understand the meaning of the word Buddha.
And what is Buddhanusati even now?
Yes. It is Buddhanusati. That's reflecting on I know it translated as reflecting on the Buddha, the truth of the Buddha. And when there is that reflection with Panya, that would be Buddhanusati. Yes.
On those qualities and on
Those
that wisdom,
qualities.
which made it possible for the understanding to develop now. And that's
Right.
why, for those who developed samatha without the understanding of realities, Buddhanusati couldn't be an object of wise consideration, because there wasn't the understanding of the truth of realities.
Right, right. And for Dhammanusati, then it would be understanding the truth
Of realities.
The truth of realities, the truth of what the Buddha taught.
Right. And again, it can't be an object of development of calmness without understanding of dhammas. So it's now reflecting wisely on dhammas.
Yes.
It's Dhammanusati at this moment.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to think of the third thing, but I'll have to, I'm sorry, it went. I'll raise it when it comes back.
On the Jan Cup, I have a question, just in view of what was being spoken about. Among the 40 objects of meditation, of bhavana, there is Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, and Sanghanusati. Now, there's probably a number of questions in there, but my first question is, we know that these recollections, when they're reflected on correctly, will lead to upachara samadhi. Now, what I want to know, Ajahn, is would those people who develop to the level of upachara samadhi, are they necessarily have entered the path, or are they just ordinarily patujana, or do they? That's my question. Are they mostly just patujana, or obviously they can be Arya Puggala, but I'm wondering about people, can they develop to level of upachara if they're just Puggala, patujanas?
Let's find out the absolute truth of these three Buddhanusati. No doubt, right? When there is the understanding, one knows that from whom, right? You understand what it's meant by Buddha, Panya.
By Panya.
No doubt about thinking or be gratitude to the person who has taught the truth to the Savaka, and they keep on until we can understand that, no matter how long time ago. So at moment of understanding, there can be Buddhanusati, right? We do not talk about the word, the depth, the subtlety of that profoundness of the truth by oneself, but it comes from hearing and considering. So thinking of the one who taught is Buddhanusati. It's not just sit and try to find how to recite or do anything at all. At moment of Panya is there to understand the virtues of the person who taught about truth. At that very moment, no matter what you call it, but is it not the sati which understand the virtues of the Buddha? See, do we have to say at that moment whether we should do anything, or it's there by conditions to understand all dhammas which are conditioned at that very moment, the moment of thinking about Buddha. Because in a day we think a lot, many people, what about thinking about Buddha? If there is no understanding at all, can there be any moment thinking of what we call, or use the term Buddha? See, so Buddha is not the word just to recite, but the moment of understanding the truth, beginning to get closer and closer and closer to know who he was and his virtues, great kindness, karuna for everyone who have conditioned to hear the word and understand. So this is the moment of thinking about the virtues of the Buddha. And when there is the understanding of Dhamma as Dhamma, at that moment, we don't think of the person or anyone at all, but think about the truth of reality. At that moment, it is thinking about what? Dhamma. Can it be Dhammanusati? Because we think a lot about many things, but what about thinking, considering Dhamma there? So what about Satipatthana? Is that not moment of be aware of the characteristic of the reality which is yourself, different from Dhammanusati? Just think and consider carefully about each word to understand better and better. Consider again and again and again until there can be more understanding of the truth which is hidden. And from the Buddha's word, thinking about Buddha, Buddhanusati, and understand the truth at that very moment, it is not thinking about other things, but about the truth, the absolute truth of Dhamma. And that is the Bodhi-Pakkhaya Dhamma, because it will lead to more understanding. And at that moment, not thinking about other things, but thinking again and again about Dhamma. What sati is. See, it is Dhammanusati, but not yet the Satipatthana. That's why we have to understand what is meant by sati and panya, and the moment which is there as thinking about the truth of Dhamma, which will lead to the understanding of reality as the Arya Satya. It's just very daily. That's why Buddha taught about realities in different way. In the Buddha's time, when Brahma went to see Buddha and asked about, everyone knows about to worship the Buddha and the Sangha, because they do what are they doing? What they were doing in a day can be Buddha Bhuja and Sangha Bhuja. But what about Dhamma Bhuja? See, there can be doubt and not clear understanding yet about what it's what. That's why he went to ask Buddha. Even that, see, to understand what is meant by that. And what Buddha said, to worship the Dhamma, Bhuja Dhamma, is Bhuja, the one who is so great in understanding the teachings. Anyone. So the Brahma asked Buddha, who is that person? And Buddha said, go and ask the monk, because it has to be the monk's word, who's who, because he doesn't want to have anyone to just be the head or the one who answers, but the Sangha, not just one people. So they went, and the monk said, Ananda is the way to Bhuja Dhamma, because he understands the words of the Buddha, the Dhamma. So he kept all the words of Buddha as Pahusutta or Pahusata. See, even this, who can think about but the word of Buddha can clarify what is meant by what. So the moment of thinking about the Dhamma and seeing how virtue it is, how great wisdom can be of that object, clearer and clearer. That is Dhammanusati, not thinking about the other thing, but about the Dhamma, the Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma. Or thinking about Akusala, see, it's not Dhammanusati. So it's daily life, only the word, and we cling to the word and try to find out the word. But what about the moment, which is the unknown? And Buddha taught about the truth of each moment. That's why at this moment, it can be Dhammanusati, not thinking about other things, but thinking about the Dhamma which will lead to enlightenment, like Sati and Chanda, Itipada, and so on. That is Dhammanusati, not thinking about the other thing. And there is Sati when there is Panya. So it's just what should we say for that at that very moment? Because Sati doesn't think about the other thing, but about Dhamma as Dhammanusati. And only the only the Arya person, no matter lay people or monk who are Sangha, can attain the degree of Upachara Samadhi while thinking about the Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, or Sanghanusati. When you think about Sariputta or Ananda, that is Sanghanusati, their virtues.
Mm.
If there's no understanding, people try to have Buddhanusati, recite the word Buddho and so on, or Dhammo or Sangho, but no understanding what citta is there at that moment. It's not sati, so it cannot be the three sati.
No, it's a wonderful answer. Sadhu Ajahn, sadhu.
ค่ะยินดีค่ะ
Last week, near the end of the discussion, Ajahn, you talked about Bhava and Bhavas.
Or what?
I'm sorry, I didn't, your question?
We talk about Phala,
No, Bhava.
Bhava, okay.
ไม่ใช่ค่ะท่านอาจารย์ Bhava.
อะไรนะคะ
Jan, she's talking about Bawa, as in Bawa, Basava, and so on. Bawa.
Bhava. ใช่ค่ะ
Oh, I see. Pavasava, Bhava.
Yes.
Well,
Bawa.
we talked about both Bhava and Asava, and there was some discussion on the DSG site this week. I understood Bhava. We were talking about Bhava is like the object or the Dhamma is what it is. For instance, the characteristic of seeing is to see. And yet Bhavasava didn't seem, it seemed something different. But the term Bhava used differently there. So I guess I'm wanting to clarify that. Bhavasava is more something clinging to existence, not to sense objects, but to being. So I wasn't clear at all whether what was being clung to, what would it be the object of the bhavasava?
Is the meaning of bhava and bhava clear already, so that we can go on to bhavasava?
No, perhaps we should go back to that.
I thought, Kunsara, we have talked about this.
Yes, we have two words and which are closely related, but two different Pali words. One is bhava with the short a, which means existence or being. So as in clinging to existing or clinging to
Right.
being. And like we talked about last week in the first mind or process of life, there is clinging to being.
Right.
And we talked about the other day about how strong clinging, which Zita mentioned, conditions bhava, two kinds of bhava, kama bhava and upapati bhava. So bhava there refers to, in the context of dependent origination, to kama, cetana, cetasika, which brings about results, and birth, bhava. So this is one kind of bhava used in different contexts. And then the other word is long a, bhava. And when we refer to how every reality has its own characteristic sabhava dhammas. So most rupas are sabhava rupas, but not all. So then we're talking about, as you mentioned, the characteristic of hardness has to be hard. Seeing is different from hearing.
Yes.
So there are different kinds of sabhava dhammas.
Right.
18 of the 28 rupas are sabhava rupas. So there's bhava and bhava, yes. So related, but two different words. So in the beginning of your question, you were asking about what was discussed last time, how every reality has its own bhava.
Yes.
Every reality has its own nature
Mm-hmm.
or characteristic. And then this is a little different from when we talk about, for example, bhavasava, clinging to being or existence. Yes.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to talk about bhavasava then. Bhavasava. What is the object of bhavasava? That subtle clinging to being. So being is citta, cetasika, but not sense, not this, not. There's a difference between kamasava and bhavasava. I guess I'm wondering about that.
What about just the subtle clinging to existing, to experiencing, to thinking again, like to living, like when one wakes up, just clinging to living and existing and thinking, which is different from clinging to sense objects.
Yes, it's clinging, existing. Okay. So this would come up then, the clinging to, so the object of bhavasava in that case would be thinking.
It must be thinking in the mind process, yes. So even the anagami, who has no more clinging to any sense objects or sense experiencing, but there's still the subtle clinging to existing, to experiencing in Brahma realm, to continuing on in life.
Okay.
So you mean that existing means thinking?
Thinking, clinging to life, clinging to experiencing another moment, for example.
So I mean, in the case of the anagami, would be clinging to experiencing pleasant feeling, right? Mental pleasant feeling. I mean, what do you call being or existing? Is it
Like
thinking or is it
Chitta, clinging to experiencing, or chittas to continue arising, for example, in those Brahma realms, even if there are no sense experiencing, just to experiencing again.
Existing.
It might be helpful to realize that both those words bhava and bhava, if we look at the verb to be, which is bhavati, from which we get those words. So if we look at, you were talking about, let's look at again bhavasava, which is very, very subtle. That's the last asava, or actually there's avichasava, which those two are intimately connected with. If there's no avichasava, no asava of ignorance or not knowing or unknowing, there will not be any bhavasava. So bhavasava is dependent upon ignorance. You can say ignorance is the main taproot, if you like, that one that holds all levels of ignorance together. So without avichasava, there will not be any bhavasava. It's a lot more subtle, as when you look at kamasava, which is the clinging to the sensual world of objects and things. The anagami, who has no more kamasava, will not have that clinging to the world of objects and things, which is quite gross in terms of being. When you're anagami, you cannot have that level of clinging, that level of, you cannot have any kamasava. That's why Ajahn, she spoke this morning a little bit to this, when she said beings who are born in the Rupa Brahma Loka, that's where the anagamis are born, there is no body sense, there is no smelling sense, there is no tasting sense. They have no conditions or no need for the arising of those kind of gross or rather crude, shall we say, sensual objects. So when an anagami is reborn, there still must be that very subtle clinging, or sometimes the word comes from the root su. It means like to flow, and it flows underground very subtly. It's unnoticed on the surface. It's very, very subtle flowing. I believe that's where we get the word sewer from in English, but it's by the way. So it's a very subtle form of clinging, not to objects, but just to being, to wanting to go on. It's so subtle though, but it must be there to allow rebirth to take place. If there was no bhavasava, this leaning towards wanting to become, which is rooted in ignorance, there would not be birth. So it's a different and more subtle level of clinging. It's not an easy one to necessarily to talk about, but we can think it through, especially if you realize that word bhava is based on the word bhavati, the verb to be, the verb to exist. You get lots of words like this. You got the word bhuta, you get the word bhumi, or planes of existence. So a lot of these words, like English too, and like any language, I'm sure, there's an interrelation, there's connectedness between all these words, but they have subtle, they have gradations of meaning, and they have subtleties of meaning. So when we're talking about bhavasava, we're talking about a very subtle form of clinging, which is a condition for rebirth. In this case, for the anagami in the Sudawasa, where Ajahn mentioned this morning, they do not have, because there's no clinging to those other senses, or no clinging to the crude sense world. There is only the sense of seeing, or the chakku pasada and the sota pasada, which they use, Ajahn talked about, because they still treasure the Dhamma. They appreciate hearing the Dhamma to allow them to develop more and more. But even in the Sudawasa, there are different degrees of purity. There are 5 realms in that world. So the lower realm, I understand, is more, shall we say, I don't know if we can say cruder, but it's more gross than the topmost Sudawasa plane.
I see. So I don't have quite the same grasp as you do on some of these words, Sundara, but I take it that, are you saying that the anagami would still have clinging to hearing the Dhamma? Is that would be?
That's a good question. They appreciate. We cannot. Yeah, they will always. They are appreciating Dhamma, but it depends what you mean by the word clinging. So we have to define that. What is meant in the sense? If you're an anagami, there is no clinging to gross sense objects,
Right.
but there still will be. They still have. They don't have clinging to sense objects. So
Right.
and that's one of the reasons, of course, they are born without the grosser sense of, the grosser sense prasadas. Prasada just means, that's just the rupa that's essential for, like in the case that John explained this morning, for smelling or tasting, or kaya prasada, which is the prasada, which is crucial for body sense. So those rupas will not be there. They do not have clinging to those rupas anymore. They do not have attachment to any of those grosser rupas anymore. But there is still, and there still must be ignorance, and there still must be a type of lobha there. But it's not for sense objects at that gross level.
Right. So is it clinging perhaps to considering Dhamma, thinking about Dhamma?
No, my understanding, I think, is that the anagami born in the Sudavasa plane must also experience result of karma, vipaka. So that comes in the form of hearing the Dhamma.
Oh, okay.
Impossible to have clinging to seeing or hearing for the anagami.
Impossible to have clinging to seeing or hearing, right?
Seeing or hearing all the objects, kamavachra object, but just clinging to, clinging to being, to existing.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about what they're thinking about.
I wonder how the anagami gets enlightened in his last life if there's no more hearing. So how does he hear he doesn't need to hear the Dhamma anymore in order to get it?
He hears the Dhamma. He hears the Dhamma. He can still hear. He has sota prasada. He still has ear sense.
Okay.
And he still has chakku. He still has eye sense. So he can still hear the Dhamma. There's no question about that. But when eventually,
But as I think I'm not sure, but I understand that when you are in those realms, you are like in states of absorption. So the five senses are not working.
No, that's different again. You're talking about the arupa vachara bhumi, where there is no sense, where there is no pasada rupas at all. There is only mind there in that realm. There's no, there's ultra refined, but they have the disadvantage of not being able to hear the Dhamma in those arupa, or without rupa worlds. So they do not have the rupas, to hear, for example. But in the rupa Brahma Loka, which is, if we want to talk about above and below, it's really not appropriate entirely to say above and below, but we can say in this Chakrawala, there are 32 realms of existence, and those 16 Rupa Brahma Lokas, and Ajahn was saying this morning, they have just 2 Pasada Rupas, not 5 that we have in this more grosser Kamavachara world, as opposed to the Arupa Brahma Loka, where they don't have any Pasada Rupa. So in the Anagami, who are born in the Sudhavasa, which literally means the place of purity or the place of goodliness, or depends how you want to translate it. They still have, and of those realms, there are 16 worlds, should we say, in that Arupa Brahma Loka. They still can hear because they appreciate. In actual fact, I understand it was the Brahma Sahampati, who was a bhikkhu in his last life during the time of Kassapa Buddha. He was the one who approached the Buddha when the Buddha was contemplating, shall I preach the Dhamma? And this Brahma Sahampati, who was living, who had been born in the Rupa Brahma Loka, he was the one who approached the Buddha and asked him to preach the Dhamma. So they still have ear sense, they still value that, and they obviously appreciate Dhamma. Yeah.
And for the anagami, he's destined to become fully enlightened, to become an arahat. It's only to become a sotapanna. It's impossible, for example, in the Arupa Brahma realm, because no rupas to be directly understood. But for the anagami, then whether he hears or not in that life, he will become an arahat.
Yeah.
So does the anagami has no more aversion, only ignorance and...
Yes, no more dose of any kind.
Right.
I'd like to...
Because the understanding has been accumulated to such a high degree, then it will continue to develop until the last remnants, the last anusyas have been eradicated.
I'd like to move down the level of planes a bit to our plane of existence, humans. There must be moments of bhavasava that of course we can't know about, or can we have any understanding of that in the human realm?
There can certainly be moments of bhavatanha, but bhavasa is just a very subtle form of bhavatanha. Right. So it's the same reality, but it arises at a level or intensity that is not apparent. But yes, in our daily life, there are bound to be moments of bhavatanha,
which is clinging, more than clinging, grasping for life.
Oh dear.
Yeah, there must be in the Karma Watcher, that's our world, the world of karma, the world of sensuality. There must be this world of carnality, if you like. There must be that type of clinging. It's bhavatanha is lopa. So there must be, and of course there are many different levels and there are many different strengths of that. And that's going to depend on what kind of conditions, what it will be. Yeah.
I hadn't realized that bhavatanha was lopa. Although why wouldn't I? The word tanha is there.
Well,
it's not the same kind of lopa that we talk about with attachment to sound, to visible object, that leads us on into nimitta and concept. Is it bhavatanha?
Well, it's just
we're talking about
we don't actually have to distinguish different types of whether it falls under kama tanha or bhava tanha. It doesn't really matter. It's lopa. Right. It has the characteristic of clinging. So these classifications are just a way of understanding different aspects of tanha.
Got it. Yeah. Right. I don't want to go there as long it falls under lopa.
So so if it's actually clinging to, for example, seeing as opposed to visible object, I'm not sure personally whether that falls under kama tanha or bhava tanha, but to me it doesn't really matter.
Right, I can see that it doesn't really matter at this point. Okay, thank you.
Sometimes they're useful to tease out, I think, Anne, but it's going to depend on each individual person, you know, what they find helpful or what they don't. The word tanha actually is very close to the English word. The Sanskrit word is trishna, where we get the word thirst. So it's like that thirst for sensual objects, if you like. And it also is the second noble truth, dukkha samudaya, or the arising of dukkha. Which relates to lopa cetasika. So it's a different type. There are many different levels of lopa. So yeah, and they can be useful to understand, but I think, as Jonathan has alluded to, it's not important, and you probably will never do it entirely, tease them all out. But as Ajahn would always remind us, it's much more important to have an understanding of what is presently arising, which we're inclined to forget about sometimes.
Agree completely. We've gone into this further than we need to. Okay. Thank you.
When there's the classification of kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, then bhava tanha is referring to the wrong idea, the wrong view about permanence, about reality lasting, and vibhava to nothing existing, like the end of life. So
it's basically ditthi.
To ditthi.
Yes.
Well, it can be, as Ajahn was talking to the other about, she's talking about what's called sasadaditi and uchedaditi, which is, you know, the belief that things just go on and on and on. And then there's the nihilistic view of uchedaditi, that everything just finishes. So they're very different types of bhava, but they relate to a type of, a belief system, if you like.
This is bhava tanha, vibhava tanha.
Right.
John, would you like to add a few words, because it's almost...
Yes. Can we have a little more understanding about the words bhava, tanha, or bhavasava? If we just simply say in our own word as bhava is life, is it possible to use that word to understand a little more in one's own word?
I think
understanding.
Yeah, I think we should. Yes.
No matter its power, in what plane it's life, in that plane. So clinging to life, the Nagami still see and hear. No attachment of clinging to the sound, the object, the sense object, but there is still clinging to hearing, because he's not yet an arahata. So he doesn't think about karma like the one who still have karma tanha, and that the other level. But you see that when we're talking about bhava, it's common to each life, any life, clinging to life. Is that right? Because after seeing at moment of javana through that doorway, it's there. So what asava? That's why when we use the word that, and another word for arahata is kinasava, the extinguish of asava, which does not appear because so close to seeing after 3 moments it's there. This is asava. But when it's kilesa, it's more than that can be known. So even it's there now. After seeing 3 moments, the pavasava, who knows? But when there is more clinging, it appears. That's why the clinging is lopa. And when it clings to the life, like seeing, hearing, not yet, no more circle of birth and death, but there is the bhavasava, cling to life, no matter what it is, but no attachment to sense object anymore. So at moment of seeing, usually there is clinging to the sense object, but for the anagami, there is no clinging to this visible object, but clinging to seeing, to life at that moment, which sees. Can that be understood? Pavasava everyone have, not just the Anagami, but anyone who still cling to life. Unknown, 3 moments after seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, that level of lopa is there, unknown, but it's there. So panya, which eradicate ditthi, also eradicate ditta asava. No more. Even after seeing, there can be other asava, but no ditta asava. And if there's no understanding of what and when is ditta asava, it's impossible to eradicate it. That's why at this moment of seeing, taking it for something that is sakkaya ditthi, the very, very subtle ditthi, but it's there as akusala that can be eradicated by sotapanna. So even that which is not known has to be known to have less and less attachment until panya is there. Experience the Four Noble Truths. There's no condition for wrong view to arise at all, but there is still Pavasava and Dhammasava. And Pavasava, see, anytime unknown. The Kasama at this moment, looking at something, when the attachment does not show up, who knows that it's there already as Kamasava or Pavasava, but for Sotapanna, no more Diddhasava. All of this can be understood by Panya to understand in one's own way. Like if it's simply life, clinging to life, just want to live. Not just only this life, also next life and on and on. That is Pavasava. And when it's taken for I, it is Diddhasava. And when it's so attached to the pleasure from sensuous object, it is Kamasava. Even if so very little is there. Eradicated by Anagami. So Anagami still see and hear, but no attachment to the sense object, to that which appears and that which is heard, the sound anymore, but still attached to seeing and hearing. So that can be reconsidered again and again and again.
Anajan, that is wonderful. Anajan, I appreciate, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody, I appreciate, we appreciate so much all your levels of wisdom and helping us to appreciate the Dhamma. It is most wonderful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
ขอบคุณค่ะทุกคนสวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ
ขอบคุณมากๆ